Welcome to Faith in the Folds, a podcast for ministry, biblical studies, and Christian living. I'm your host, Kevin Burr. Today, Matt Collins joins me on the podcast. Matt is the founder and president of Magnolia Foundation, a nonprofit that serves families who have lost children. Matt and I have known each other for close to 10 or so years now. Matt, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, Kevin. Thanks for having me today. Appreciate the opportunity to share about our story and what we're up to with Magnolia.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember, Matt. We knew of each other a long
Right.
time before we actually first got to meet. Do you remember when that was and like what
I
what we were
I
doing?
think if I remember correctly, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I think we first met at a Smokies game, a Tennessee Smokies
Yes.
game.
And before we started talking, we were just before we started recording,
Yeah,
we were just talking about the Tennessee Smokies, a double A team based out of Sevierville, Tennessee, for anyone who's interested.
yeah, right. They have a great ballpark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm nearly positive that was our first. I guess it could have been in a church building somewhere, but I'm pretty positive Tennessee Smokies game was our first formal introduction
Yeah.
via your brother Philip.
Yeah. That sounds about right. Would that have been 2016? Was
Probably,
that
yeah.
long ago?
I moved to Cookeville, Tennessee, hour or so east of Nashville, um, at the beginning of 2015. So we've been here. This is our 10th year, in our 10th year in Cookeville, and so yeah, probably 2016 was
Yeah.
our first Smokies experience. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that sounds right. Mutual connection being arguably Faith in the Fold's most consistent fan, Philip Burr, my middle brother.
Yes, that's
So
true.
shout out to Philip.
That's true.
Appreciate all the support
Yeah,
that you've given the podcast over the years.
yeah.
Which is coming up on 3 years here at the beginning of March. But yeah, I think in the course of just all the conversations that I had with Philip about Bible things, because he knew I was in school for that, and talking with his friend, mutual acquaintance John Nichols, who's been on the podcast
Hmm.
with the two of us before, talking about
Hmm.
a preacher training camp that y'all put together some time ago. I think it was at a Tennessee Smokies game. It was in the summer and my
Yeah.
wife was pregnant. So it was sometime
Yes.
before July when we did it. And I
That
think
all.
I rolled up in a fishing shirt, and like you and John and I were all wearing fishing shirts. And Philip
Yeah,
Philip did a really
that sounds
bad job of
accurate.
hiding his jealousy because we had
Yeah,
we
we
had the
looked good.
minister's wardrobe.
Yeah, we looked good. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you joining us today on the
Yeah.
podcast to talk about some pretty serious things, but
Yeah.
also maybe to talk about some ways that some people can help others who have
Hmm.
been through what you and many others have been through. First, let's get to know you a little bit. How did you get to where you are? I mean, you started in ministry about 10 or so years
Hmm.
ago, at least in Cookeville. Kind of walk us through how you got to where you are and what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I did youth ministry for 12 years, until really full time until just this year, January 1st of 24, officially started um, working with Magnolia on a full time basis. Our nonprofit began last year in 2023, and so my wife and I were doing both things for a little while. And January 1st, we just focused on one thing. But yeah, I'm from Mount Juliet, Tennessee, and grew up in the Mount Juliet Church, and pursued ministry after high school. Went to college for ministry and. Wanted to be a youth minister. It's all I ever wanted to do was be a youth minister. And people would ask me, what are you going to do next? And I never had an answer for that because I just wanted to do youth ministry
Hmm.
and loved my time in it, and still obviously not that far out of it, but love youth ministry and teens and families. It's just a really special time, and I had a great experience in my personal youth group growing up, and so that really helped to shape and mold what I thought about my life and what I wanted to do with it. So did youth ministry for a long time, almost 10 years in Cookeville, and a few years before that in the Nashville area. And so, yeah, so we just kind of launched this foundation several months ago, but just really aggressively in the past couple of months since I've taken it on a full-time basis.
Yeah. Um, Let me ask before we actually get to talking a little bit about Magnolia, because I'm always interested in this because I work at a church and I'm trying to spot, the people here that have, some kind of ministry gift or another.
Mhm.
Friends of the podcast will know that I also teach adjunct for Harding School of Theology, and that is a school that's dedicated to training ministers. Matt,
Mhm.
how did you discern, or like, other than the positive experiences and things like that you just mentioned, how did you discern and maybe a call to ministry, or an
Mhm.
affinity for ministry, and
Yeah,
did other people like kind of point you in that direction? Walk me
yeah,
through that a little bit if you don't mind.
yeah, for sure. So I was really told, more or less like this is what you can do.
Mhm.
You have a gift. My preacher was a big proponent of that. Like telling me. I remember vividly. I was probably 14, 15 years old, and we were going around the room, and we were sharing what we thought our giftedness was at that age, and I didn't have an answer. I didn't know. And so it got to my turn, and I said, I don't know.
Mhm.
And which, most people that are that age don't know. And
Sure.
so I didn't have any idea. And my preacher, who was in the room, and also happened to be my best friend's father, so we had a good relationship. He told me what my gift was.
Oh,
He said,
wow.
this is this is what it is." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, okay, like that sounds great." Um, and really, he really pushed me and put me in positions, and told me like, you can do this, you can do this, and then it got to, you should do this.
Hmm.
um, and the more I listened, the more I kind of followed his lead, and I realized, I can do this. I am good at this. I love connecting with teenagers on this level, and families, and um, this is something that I enjoy. It's something that, you know I feel like I'm pretty good at. And but yeah, the very beginning, I it was really listening to somebody that said, "Hey, you don't know what you can do, but I know what you can do,"
Yeah.
and told me that, and then put me in a lot of positions, and gave me a lot of opportunities to kind of flesh some of those things out. And turns out I really liked it. And so yeah, that was that. I really had a big advocate, that kind of pointed me in the direction of ministry.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm grateful for, for folks like you who have that story.
Hmm.
I didn't have anyone, kind of tap me on the shoulder that I remember. And I'll always give that
Yeah.
caveat because, let's I the only reason why I don't remember any weekends in college is because I'm just forgetful, right? It's not because
Right.
I was, like doing
Yeah.
anything else that I shouldn't have been doing in college.
Right.
I'm just kind of forgetful. So
Right.
I'll give the caveat that, maybe I just don't remember,
Yeah.
somebody from my home congregation telling
Hmm.
me, hey Kevin, I think you've got a gift for this. Um, but I don't know that I would have even, acknowledged what that was like. Like I had originally planned to go to college to do youth ministry,
Hmm.
and then later that changed, and I was going to do something else. But I'm glad to hear that there are people out there, and for anyone kind enough to listen, I think it's important for us to keep an eye out for our young men and women, to show them what
Hmm.
their giftedness is,
Hmm.
and to find appropriate ways for them to be able to exercise that.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. I'm glad, Matt, I'm glad that you have had those opportunities, and had people
Yeah.
who could pinpoint you on that.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Super thankful for him.
You you served in youth ministry for a while, and
Hmm.
like you said, have just recently started working with Magnolia Foundation full time. Matt, walk us through that particular process, what led you to
Mhm.
begin? What led you to found Magnolia?
Yeah.
And why even the name Magnolia? I was joking earlier with you. I figured you and you might be a big Stephen Joanna Gaines fan. Apparently, that's not the case. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah. We're not from Waco, not fans of, they're great, right? They do great work.
Yeah, not
But
affiliated,
yeah,
right?
not affiliated. No. Happy to be sponsored by them if they'd like to talk about that.
All right.
Um,
I'll
no,
get my people on that.
yeah,
Get
send it
this in
over.
front of them.
Right. Yeah. So the how we came about this foundation, and specifically what we do, it was born out of loss, out of grief. Um, my wife and I, we are parents of three girls, Hattie, Lainey, and Davy. And Hattie's our oldest daughter. And in March the 3rd of 2020, early that morning, around 2 a.m., an F4 tornado came right down our street in Cookeville, Tennessee, and our home was directly impacted by that storm. Um, flattened flattened our house. We left with nothing, and in the midst of that storm, we lost our oldest daughter, Hattie. And at the time, we had Hattie, we had Lainey. Hattie was 4.5. Lainey was 2 days shy of being one. Our youngest daughter, Davy, was not born yet. And so during that storm, we woke up in a hurry to an alarm going off when we weren't expecting storms. Didn't know, weren't, really, like a lot of people, really weren't paying a lot of attention to, anything that was going to happen that night. And so
Yeah.
we were asleep, woke up in a kind of in a flash, and I grabbed Hattie from the bed, and my wife grabbed Lainey from the bed. And by the time that we got the girls, we had met in a hallway of our house, and we had no time to go anywhere else. We didn't have time to get in the room. As soon as we grabbed our girls, the tornado was there, and we knew it. We could feel it. We could hear it. And a lot of those feelings and memories, are very vivid. Um, but once the storm came, we knew pretty quickly, obviously that there was a lot of things that were wrong. My wife and I were both beat up. Our daughter, Lainey, our youngest, she was life flighted to Vanderbilt, and Hattie never, they never, she didn't make it. And so didn't come to the hospital. Was taken by some of our neighbors at the scene, and taken to the medical professionals. They had set up like a triage location nearby because people couldn't get into our neighborhood because of the damage. And so that's where they took Hattie. And in the midst of that, we were loved on, and still are loved on and cared for by a host of people. And you can imagine that storm that night, it rocked our city,
Yeah.
of Cookeville. And there were 19 people that passed away in that storm, and our daughter was one of them. And so, people cared about us and loved on us, specifically our church family and the church families we've been affiliated with, whether it be through ministry or growing up, or, my wife and I both went to a Christian university. And so we had friends that were in ministry at different churches, kind of all over. And so we felt a lot of support and a lot of love come from that time. But one thing that we never ran into was an organization that specifically helps families who've lost kids. And so I do want to say, I'm not saying they don't exist, because I know that they do.
Yeah.
They do exist. But in our experience, we just never interacted with one. Nobody reached out to us and said, "Hey, we know that you've lost a child, and we want to come alongside you." Nobody referred us to one. Nobody told us, "Hey, we know that this is out there, and we want to point you in that direction." We didn't have that experience, but we knew we wanted to honor Hattie. We knew we wanted to do something that would serve people. And so the nonprofit really wasn't on our radar, at the beginning of loss and grief. And the beginning was we knew we wanted to do something that kind of bore her mark. And so we set up a scholarship at Tennessee Tech University, which is in Cookeville, for nursing students. So we endowed a scholarship for nursing students here. The first year we had one student that received that scholarship. Now there are 3 nursing students that receive the Hattie Jo Collins Memorial Scholarship.
Yeah.
And that's been something that we have enjoyed kind of watching grow, and enjoyed, being able to serve some students in that way. The nurses that took care of us and took care of our daughter Lainey at a couple of different hospitals were so kind and so good to our family, that we felt like we wanted to, honor our daughter, but also supporting what the work that they do, because it's important work and great work.
Yeah.
And so we did that, and we came back to Cookeville several months later, and we were relocated for a few months. Obviously we lost our house, and so we lived with my in-laws, my wife's parents, for a little while. We came back to Cookeville, and I started back into youth ministry again, and served in that capacity for 4 years. But during that time, I couldn't help but shake this feeling or sensation that there was something else that I needed to be doing, and something that I wanted to do. And the loss of Hattie has been something that has affected my wife and I, and our whole family tremendously in a lot of different ways. And one of those ways is, we have felt this drive to do something for her. And what I mean is, there are things that, when you have kids, there are things you do for them, right?
Yeah.
Help them get their clothes on, help them take a bath. As they grow, you do other things for them. And all of those things, we can't do those things for Hattie anymore. She's not with us physically. And so we've been searching after something that would almost, let us put our hands on her, even though we can't, right? Sure. And so something that felt tangible. And over the years, we have talked about, what that might be. And, as we thought about, our own experience in the immediate aftermath of loss, we thought about the fact that we were supported by church people, by God's people, but that we didn't come across a lot of organizations specifically geared towards families like us.
Yeah.
And so then it kind of led us to this thought of, okay, we had support and love and care, and we still do. But what about families that lose their kids that don't have a built-in sense of community? Mm-hmm. What about families that are not connected to bodies of believers that can support them and hold them up and carry them? Who serves those families? Who cares about those families that don't have this community kind of baked into their lifestyle? We did, and but there are a lot of people that lose their kids that don't have that. And so that was really our thought: who serves these families? And so, and we just decided, well, I guess that's going to be us. And so we started working on the process of developing our vision for what we wanted, how we wanted to serve, and what we wanted to do. It really took almost a year to get things off the ground. I mean, just between deciding ourselves what we wanted to do and how we wanted to serve, and then talking to, of course, lawyers and CPAs and things like that to get some of the legal things going and make sure that we set this up, properly. And so after about a year of working through all of those processes, we founded the Magnolia Foundation. And we serve families who've lost kids. And really we do that in there's 3 primary ways that we serve. One of those is with assistance with funeral expenses. So, a funeral is not something you ever plan on for your child. There's a lot of people that don't set aside money or funds for that. Some people do, but not everybody does. And I would wager that far fewer people actually set that aside than what than everybody else that doesn't. And so funeral expenses is a real immediate need. So when a family loses a child, whether it be cremation or funeral, burial, whatever kind of support that looks like, we serve in that way. We help with that. There's a lot of financial ways that are needed that we don't help with, right? We don't walk into the medical expense side of things, although typically that's there. We focus on funeral and the expenses surrounding that. So we do that. The second thing that we do is we help with access to grief counseling. And so, every family that experiences loss in any kind, a child, a divorce, a move, anything that brings about grief comes from loss, and any kind of grief. What we have found out, and what I think people know to be true, is that everybody handles those things really differently. Everybody grieves differently. And so we think it's really important that families have an outlet to learn how to and help them learn how to grieve well and grieve well together within their family unit. You can look up stats, and I don't know how official some of these are or are not, but families fall apart pretty easily after the loss of a child, and you can look at things that will tell you that divorce rates and things like that will tell you that families really struggle in the aftermath with how they can grieve, because you grieve so individually. It's so unique to the person that can cause some fractures, or at least can reveal some fault lines that may already exist in a marriage and a family. And so connecting them with people who can help them in the immediate aftermath, learn what it's like to grieve well, but grieve well together, we think it's really important. And so we assist with the family's first 5 grief counseling sessions. And so we try to connect them to a licensed professional counselor that can meet their needs in those ways. We are not that. My wife and I are not. We are not professional counselors, and we don't pretend to be.
Right.
If we need to speak with a family just through experience-based things, then we can do that, and we have done that. But that's not something that we claim to kind of have the market cornered on. And so we want to make sure that families connect with people who are trained professionals and serve in those ways. And so we do that, and that's can happen really anywhere. Virtually opens us up to a lot of possibilities with counseling connections. And then if people have specific individuals that they feel comfortable with in their own community, then we connect them in that way too. And then the third way is what we call commemorative care. And so commemorative care is kind of like what it sounds. It's a longer walk with families, but we connect with them a few times a year and help them commemorate or honor their child. Mm-hmm. So you think about special days that you have in your family, birthdays and holidays, beginning of the school year, and in our cases, the anniversary of loss. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that family feels loved and cared for and thought about, even after all of the immediate, the immediate time frame is kind of passed on. It feels like the whole world moves on, and frankly, you don't, and you shouldn't. You've lost a child, and your life will never be the same, and it will always hurt, and it should always hurt. And so we want to make sure that we can come alongside families who have experienced that, even after everybody else kind of goes back to what their normal life is like. And even after some ways you feel like you kind of have to, at some point in time, you go back to work, and, there are other birthdays that come along with maybe other children, or, there are things that happen, and we want to make sure that, that families know that, nobody's forgotten totally, even when it feels like they have. Yeah. And so we connect with families a few different times a year. We send them something. We mail it to them, and it just personalized, unique things. And sometimes it's generic books to read, or different things that they can have, put on their nightstand and have to look at and remember that there's somebody that cares and wants to help them honor or commemorate their child. So those are the ways that we serve.
Yeah.
The way that we came across our name, Magnolia Foundation, is it's a story. I appreciate you asking. It's a story that I like to share.
Mhm.
Um, so a few days before, it's actually my wife's story to share. She's not here with me today, but a few days before this storm, my wife was driving around Hattie, our oldest, and Lainey. Lainey was, like I said, she's almost one at the time.
Mhm.
Hattie's 4.5, and they're driving around Cookeville. I'm not with them. It's just the three of them. And Hattie asked Macy, my wife, um, if there are any magnolia trees around, which to her was an interesting question because we are not people who really have a lot of plants. It wasn't a topic of conversation at our house at all. In fact,
Why,
I don't.
why would you
Well,
know that
we didn't.
tree? Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Why would you know that? We didn't have any trees at our house,
Mhm.
really, and so it wasn't. We lived in a pretty flat lot. It was just a very normal, neighborhood kind of
Yeah.
deal. Um, and so it wasn't just an odd question that she asked. And so Macy told her, she said, "Hey, Hattie, next time we come across a magnolia tree, I'll show you one." In fact, her parents, Hattie's grandparents, have a magnolia tree at their house. And so she just told her, "Hey, next time we see one, I'll show you what a magnolia tree looks like." And just kind of that was it. Topic changed, moved on. And but Macy remembered that. She remembered that conversation, and in fact, brought it up. And so after the storm came, there was somebody, we don't know who, somebody donated 4 burial plots to our family. At the time, there was, myself, my wife, and then our 2 girls.
Yeah.
And so they gave us 4 burial plots at a local cemetery funeral home in Cookeville. And of course, we were in the hospital with various injuries ourselves, and so we never went out there and checked them out. We didn't look for placement. Frankly, not that we weren't thankful, but it really wasn't something that we were
Right.
super concerned with. We
Yeah.
we were thankful to have them, but we would have taken anything at that point.
That was
It
something you
didn't
could
matter where it was.
shelve pretty easily, I imagine.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And so um, there were some friends of ours that were, working on our behalf on a variety of things, and that was one of them. And so some friends, they went to the funeral home and they took care of all the logistical things about what we needed to do to receive those in the proper way. And so we never went out there until the day of the burial. And so as we were driving up to our daughter's burial, along with everybody else who was there at the funeral or at the graveside service, we pulled in at the same time. So we weren't there any earlier than anyone else. We weren't there to check things out. We just showed up like everybody else did.
Mhm.
And we were riding with my wife's parents. And as we pulled up, Macy, she kind of squeezed my hand and she pointed out to us. She said, "Do you notice what's right there by the grave?" And there was a magnolia tree right there. And in fact, there are 4 magnolia trees that are in the location of our family's burial plots. And Macy, she noticed it immediately because they had just had this conversation about, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'll show you a magnolia tree when I get the chance." And of course, she never had the opportunity to show her because the storm came. And so for us, immediately, we thought about that conversation. Macy immediately went to that time she talked with Hattie about a magnolia tree,
Mhm.
just a couple of days before the storm. And so we have held on to that. And we have felt like that was just a little glimpse from the Lord, that He's there, that He cares. And so we've held on to that magnolia tree as kind of a symbol for us, for Hattie. And so now at our house we live in now, we have a magnolia tree planted in our front yard.
Wow.
We have pictures of magnolia leaves, framed in our house. And our youngest daughter, who's been born since the storm, her name is Davy. Her middle name is Magnolia, Davy Magnolia. And so when it came time to start this foundation, we knew we wanted it to honor Hattie and we wanted to bear her mark. And so, so we named it Magnolia in honor of her, and that's just become our symbol for her, and so we named it Magnolia, after our oldest Hattie, who we lost in the storm. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of who we are and what we do, and how we got our name.
Yeah. Matt, I can't help but appreciate the fact that magnolia trees are also evergreens,
Yeah,
and
I know it.
that's something that you want the memory of that to always be there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful tree and a beautiful representation of her for us. We've had a couple of moments like that. I kind of liken it to, Moses uh, doesn't get to go to the promised land, right initially. And so the
Mm,
Lord takes him up on a mountain and he shows him
yeah.
what it's going to look like. He gives Moses a glimpse, right? He doesn't have what he wants, but he gives him a glimpse, um, and to show his faithfulness to him, and that he's going to take care of his people. And I felt like there's been a couple of times where we've had a glimpse. You
Yeah.
know, the magnolia tree was one of those. In fact, the last words that Hattie ever spoke is another glimpse. Before the storm, Macy, and we would read, our daughter's bedtime stories, like a lot of families do.
Yeah.
And so, this particular night, we would kind of go back and forth on who was reading, depending on who was doing other things, right? And so, this night, my wife was reading the bedtime story to Hattie, and it was one of those, where you lay your kids down in bed and you read them a story, and then you wait for them to fall asleep, and then you try to like maneuver your way out of the bed and get
We've all been
and
there.
get to
Yeah.
your sure. And so that's kind of that was the setup we had going on, and so Macy's reading to her, and she's not falling asleep, and she finishes her story and the whole deal, and she says, Hattie, you need to go to sleep, and she's not falling asleep, and she's just kind of sitting there, and she tells my wife, she says, Mommy, she's laying there with her eyes open, she says, Mommy, I can see Jesus. And my wife is a little caught off guard. Jesus certainly wasn't an uncommon conversation topic in our house, right?
No. Yeah.
But it wasn't. We didn't talk about what he looked like or any of that. I mean, it just wasn't. It was a little different scenario.
Hmm.
And she said, "Hey, you can see Jesus." And she said, "Yeah, I can see Jesus." And he said, "Well, tell me, like, what does he look like? Like, what do you see?" And she said, "He's wearing all white. Jesus is wearing all white." And that was the last thing she ever said. She finished telling my wife she could see Jesus and he was wearing all white, and then she went to sleep, and she never woke up. Um, there have been. I can't imagine. Almost. I mean, I can't. I don't want to imagine what it would be like to not have some of those moments.
Yeah.
And we have felt like Hattie has been held by the Lord, for us on our behalf, and some of those moments, have been glimpses for us to see that, um, and to know that he has her. Um, and so the magnolia tree is one of those, as well. And so we named Magnolia Foundation after the magnolia tree, after the conversation that Hattie had, with Macy.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I started thinking about, all the stories that we read to our boys. We've got two boys, and we finished the Chronicles of Narnia with the oldest.
Yeah,
We we've made it through the Hobbit. We're in the Lord of the Rings. We're slugging through some pretty dense
yeah,
stuff for a 7-year-old. And
sure, yeah.
our
Buckle up.
younger. Yeah, what?
Said buckle up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And we're working through some of the same kind of stuff with our younger as well.
mhm,
And the the your idea there that the magnolia tree is a reminder
mhm,
of something much bigger, and
mhm,
especially Matt too mentioning Moses getting to see the country,
mhm,
getting a glimpse of it, the tree, the fact that it's evergreen
Hmm.
reminds me consistently of a theme that kind of runs throughout all most of the 7 books of the Narnia stories, where you know those certain individuals here and there are awaiting something greater. An
Hmm.
obvious callback to the book of Hebrews. I mean, C.S. Lewis knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
That they
Sure.
were
Sure.
awaiting something greater, and the sign, various symbols would remind them or
Hmm.
give them hope that something greater is to come. They await
Yeah.
something that is more wholesome, more pure,
Hmm.
un unsullied by the sin and loss and destruction of the world. And yeah, I just all that comes all that comes flooding to mind
Hmm.
as you talk about that. Yeah. Um, I I don't talk about this a lot on the podcast because it's not always relevant.
Hmm.
But I haven't ever lost an immediate family member like what you've
Okay.
experienced.
Yeah.
Um, about I think it was about 10, 10 years ago, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law lost their little baby. Um,
Okay.
they knew that he had developed trisomy 13. And so, for those who aren't familiar, it's a
Hmm.
chromosomal abnormality that causes multiple and complex organ defects. And they found that out in October,
Hmm.
and she was developing preeclampsia, and so they needed to induce labor
Right.
um, in December. And the doctor said that he would have maybe an hour to live, and God graced us with 2 hours with
Mm.
him. And there have been it's similar in some ways, different obviously in other ways from y'all's experience. This was their first,
Hmm.
and you can imagine, right? All the hopes and dreams that you have, right, of our
Yeah.
first, right? When
Yeah.
someone asks me, what do you hope for your oldest? It's like, my goodness, a family, ability to provide,
Yeah.
faithfulness to God above all
Right.
things, right? Like that, those are the things I hope for. I hope it's a lifetime of that, and you
Hmm.
know, but I have, we have ever since then, we've engaged in some of those commemorative reflections that you talked about there,
Hmm.
that Magnolia helps with some of the families that y'all work with. In the course
Hmm.
of that, I have been, because I haven't lived near them, I've been somewhat insulated from the kinds of things that people say that
Yeah.
are meant to be helpful, right?
Sure.
But
Sure.
ultimately may not quite land.
Yeah.
Um, in kind of a general way, Matt, what would you recommend based on y'all's experience? What would you recommend people maybe not say? What are some helpful
Hmm.
things that people could say?
Yeah.
Kind of walk us through some of that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. That's a great. I appreciate that question. Let me start, I guess, by saying this. A lot of people are, when you come across somebody who is in deep grief, right? I mean, they've lost a child, lost a spouse, and it's immediate. It's immediate after the loss. Um, we can be really scared to say anything.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
what do you say, right? And so because of fear, we can avoid that person or the conversation altogether. Um, One of the things that I would love to communicate to people is to uh, give those that are in grief an opportunity to share if they want to.
Yeah.
So ask a question. You can ask a question. Um, you can say the name of the person who's been lost. It's okay. And if the person in grief doesn't want to talk about it, then they won't. Um, but if you remove that topic, if you take it off the table,
Yeah.
then you've taken the opportunity away for somebody to share in a way that they might really want to. My daughter, my oldest daughter, Hattie, we lost her. She's still my daughter,
Hmm.
and I love her and I care about her. And who doesn't love to talk about things they love,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
All of us do. And so,
What parent doesn't love to talk about their kids?
certainly,
Right.
yeah, it's your
What
kids. And
what
so,
loving parent doesn't, you just, beam with joy and pride, right? When they talk
yeah,
about their
yeah,
kids.
and
Yeah.
absolutely. And I love Hattie. And so, to be able to share about her is something that I enjoy doing. And, you know, and so, but if somebody decides that they're scared to bring her up, then I've been robbed of an opportunity to share in a way that might be really
Sure.
helpful
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm going to say this, give yourself some permission, to have conversations with people. Don't avoid them. Don't run away from them. You know, but talk to them. Be present with them. One of the things that has been really special to my wife and I, is we've got a friend here in Cookeville, and on her birthday a few years ago, he just shot us a text, and we were having dinner. My wife and I were having dinner, and he shot us a text, and he said, "Hey, tell me something that I don't know about Hattie. Tell me something cool I don't know about Hattie." And that was a question we had never been asked before. And so I pulled up my phone and I showed my wife, this text. And I said, "Hey, we just got this," and so we had an opportunity to share with each other, some things that were cool about Hattie together, and that was good for us. And then we got to share with him, and his family, some things that that they didn't know about her, and we loved. That was one of the best things that we had happen, was just that question, you know. And so asking people like, "Hey, what did you love about the person you lost? Tell me something I don't know about them." That question for us has been really, really meaningful. And if there's an opportunity where you ask that and I don't want to talk about it, then I'll tell you, "Hey, today's not a good day,
Yeah.
but I appreciate you asking. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share." So I would start by giving people a little bit of permission, to have some of those conversations. There are certainly things you can say that are not helpful, certainly,
Yeah.
and we've heard several of them, um, you know, in various places. Um, One of the most common things that you hear, and this is not having to do specifically with child loss or even loss in general, but you hear this phrase all the time. And when I was in youth ministry, I would talk about it with our teens. Um, I don't believe it to be true at all, and so I don't think it's it works in any setting. But everything happens for a reason.
Hmm.
You've probably heard that
Yeah. Yeah.
numerous times, and I think it's bogus. You know, you can't tell me a reason, any logical reason, why an F4 tornado with 175-mile-per-hour winds tore through our street and destroyed our house and took our daughter. There's not a reason for it.
Yeah.
There's not. I refuse to believe that there's one. Um, and so for somebody to say, "Hey, everything happens for a reason," I wholeheartedly disagree with that statement. Um,
It's
in
so
our specific
general.
case,
Yeah.
it's so general.
It's
Yeah.
so general that
Um,
it's unhelpful. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So that I wouldn't say that. I don't believe that in any aspect of life, much less our own grief experience. Um, and then there are some other things that people say specifically around loss, right? God must have needed him or her, as if God needs anything from us in
No.
in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
He must have needed another angel. He doesn't. First of all, he doesn't.
Right.
Um, but second of all, I mean, just the idea that God needs something, so He's going to take it from you. I don't know. That's the picture of God that I see.
Yeah.
A lot of,
Mhm.
um, and so there are some things like that I wouldn't really recommend saying, because they're just not true. This is all part of God's plan. I don't know that it is, right? I don't think God's plan is for you to hurt. I don't think God's plan is for you to experience loss. I think God's plan is to make things right.
Hmm.
God's plan is to reconcile, not crush.
Right.
And so I don't believe that losing my daughter is part of God's plan. I think God's plan for my life and for all of our lives is to reconcile, you know, and to do work that is just beyond our sight to make things right. And you know, um, we've experienced something that's not fair,
Yeah.
but we have seen God. We have seen God act in His justice and His kindness, not in fairness, but in justice and in kindness. Justice only happens when injustice happens first,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, justice can't take place until injustice takes place. And so we feel like what's happened to in our experience has been not fair. It's been unjust. And but we believe that God, in His justice and His mercy and His grace and His kindness, has come alongside us behind that injustice,
Mhm.
and has cared for us behind that injustice, and with His people. And so to say that this is all part of God's plan, or that God must have needed her, or things like that, are just not helpful, and they're just not true.
Yeah.
And so to say them to somebody who's lost a child, or really to anybody that's in grief, I would really advocate for not saying those things, but instead, ask somebody, "Hey, tell me what you love about that person. Tell me something I don't know about that person. What's a special memory that you have with that person?" Those are things that are helpful,
Yeah.
and that we enjoy sharing those things, because once again, we have the opportunity to share about our daughter, who we love and
Yeah.
care about and miss. And who doesn't love to talk about their kids and who they love? So
Hmm.
yeah, those
Yeah.
are those are a few things I would say as to what to say, and then maybe what not to say.
Yeah. Asking those kinds of questions too, like what's something I didn't know,
Hmm.
what's something you love about her, what's something funny, he or she
Yeah,
did. Those help you, the asker,
hmm,
celebrate the life
yes,
and the memory uh, of the one who's passed, to celebrate
yeah,
with you who's still grieving. Yeah, so y'all can
absolutely,
celebrate together. Yeah,
hmm,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Matt, let me switch gears just a bit here and ask you, as we kind of wind down here, how can people help Magnolia? Where can we find you? How can people help
Hmm.
what y'all are doing? What kinds of things do y'all ask for from others, so you can
Sure.
in turn be a blessing to these families who are in need of it?
Yeah. So there's a couple of ways you can find us. We have a website. It's themagnoliafoundation.com.
Okay.
Just all one word, themagnoliafoundation.com. We have a social media presence on Facebook and on Instagram. On Facebook, it's just facebook.com/the Magnolia Foundation.
Okay.
And our page is right there. And then we have an Instagram presence. It's just at Magnolia Foundation on
Okay.
Instagram.
Yeah.
And one of the ways, and when I say this, I truly mean it, that you could be the most helpful to us is by interacting and sharing the things that we post on our social media platforms.
Mhm.
Um, and I say that because there are people that need to see it, need to know that they're not by themselves. But also, we have actually come across several families who we are serving that have heard about us on social media.
Wow.
And so I'll tell people all the time, you have no idea who all sees what you post, and that can be a really good thing,
Mhm.
you know. And so in our experience, we've had several families from different states, um, who have had a friend that shared something that we posted, and they said, "Hey, we'd like to talk to that family because we've lost a child, or we just lost a child, or we know somebody that has." And so we've been connected to several families because they saw it on social media, and so that is so helpful. It takes just a second to click share, and you really have no idea who all sees that. And so we are able to serve families from all over. And one of those driving forces is social media, and people share what we have to say, and we're connected with the right people. And so if you wonder to yourself, like, what's a really practical way that I can help families who've lost kids? That is a really practical way.
Yeah.
And it's unless you are interacting with families on a day-to-day basis like we are, it's hard to really understand and know how important that is. But it's really, really important. So if people share what we're doing, that's really helpful. And then practically, on our website, there's a platform to give financially. That's really helpful to us. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We serve families who've lost kids, and we need your support and partnership in doing that. And then B, you can write off donations on your taxes, which is helpful for people that want to do that. But funeral expenses and grief counseling and commemorative care, none of those things are free. And frankly, they're not cheap, but they're really important. And so for us to come alongside a family who's lost a child and say, hey, listen, we want to help you with this funeral, is so meaningful, so meaningful. But we need money to do it. And the same goes for grief counseling. For us to say, hey, we want to connect you to a counselor in your area or a counselor online that can help your family walk through this grief and learn to process and learn to carry the burden. The burden doesn't go away, but you learn how to carry that burden with each other. It's so important to those families, but it's not free. And so, and the same thing with commemorative care. And so we need financial support. This is what we do full time. My wife and I both. This is our jobs, and so we're supported by this. But we also support families in some tremendous ways. And so, if somebody wants to partner with us financially, we are so grateful for that kind of partnership. And it really is meaningful, not only to us, but to families that we serve from all over the place.
Yeah. Matt, I'll be sure to put links in the description below on, and everyone who's a friend of the podcast, let me encourage you to find Magnolia Foundation and help them boost their social media presence, because they're doing a really good work. Matt, any last words before we wrap up today?
Yeah, let me say this. I should have said this a second ago, but considering the audience that we're talking to, if there is an opportunity for us to come to your church, we'd love to do that and share your church and who we are, what we do, and whether it be with your leadership or whether it be sharing in an assembly time together, happy to do that. And if that opportunity is something that you think might be helpful for us to come and share about our experience, but about grief and about how the Lord works in that, and about what we're doing even right now with families, would love to share. And so I know this is an audience that might be tailored more towards, would love to share with your churches if that is something that is that you think would be helpful. Would love to connect with you about that and talk about what we could do there.
Yeah, that's a good word, Matt. Really appreciate your time today, sir.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.